story time, it's my favorite time, spending time reading with you. Welcome to another story time with GamGam. Let's see what we have for today. Welcome back to Story Time with GamGam. Our story today is Short Tales Furlock and Muttson's Mysteries, The Case of the Missing Goldfish. This was written by Robin Coutts. Good morning, Furlock, said Muttson. How are you? I'm tired, Furlock said. I stayed up late reading my detective comics. Take a nap, said Muttson. I will answer the telephone if it rings. Soon the telephone rang. Furlock and Muttson Detective Agency, Muttson said. Uh-oh, I see. We're on our way. Mrs. Bumblebear, Muttson said. What has happened? Furlock asked. Goldie the goldfish is missing, Muttson said. Goldfish? Furlock licked her lips. Stop that, cried Muttson. It's our job to find Goldie, not to eat her. Furlock jumped to her feet. Fire up the Furlock mobile, she said. They sped to the house of Mrs. Bumblebear. Mrs. Bumblebear met them at her door. Thank goodness you are here, she said. Don't worry, we'll find your goldfish, said Furlock. What does she look like? Asked Furlock. She is a goldfish, said Mrs. Bumblebear. Goldfish is gold, Muttson said quietly. He wrote on his notepad. Where did you see her last? Furlock asked. She was in her fishbowl, Mrs. Bumblebear said. She led them to the fishbowl on a small table. Someone spilled the water on the table, said Furlock. Water on the table, Muttson said, taking notes. Furlock noticed a cup of water on a chair next to the table. Someone did not finish this water, he said. What does that mean? Cried Mrs. Bumblebear. I'm not sure, said Furlock. We must look for more clues. Furlock peeked into a doorway next to the chair. Is this the kitchen? She asked. Yes, said Mrs. Bumblebear. Furlock saw a bag of bread, a bag of cookies, and a box of plastic bags. Someone made a sandwich, she said. Muttson nodded. Furlock saw another doorway next to the first. Is that the bathroom? She asked. Yes, said Mrs. Bumblebear. Furlock looked at the fishbowl on the table. She looked at the cup on the chair. Aha, she said. Muttson poked in the toilet for a goldfish. No way, cried Muttson. If Goldie were in the toilet, we would see her. You're right, said Furlock. Now the case is solved. Oh, said Muttson. Yes, I see. Goldie jumped from her fishbowl to the cup, asked Mrs. Bumblebear. That is correct, said Furlock. And then she jumped from the cup to the toilet? Yes, said Furlock, and I'm afraid that someone flushed. Oh dear, Mrs. Bumblebear cried. Kippy will be heartbroken. Who is Kippy? Asked Muttson. Kippy is my son, said Mrs. Bumblebear. He was so happy this morning, Mrs. Bumblebear said. Today was show and tell. Muttson stared at his notepad. Furlock, I think we have it all wrong, he said. What did I miss? Asked Furlock. You didn't miss a thing, Muttson said. Do you remember the plastic bags in the kitchen? Yes, said Furlock. Do you remember the cup on the chair? Yes. Why? Asked Furlock. Mrs. Bumblebear blew her nose on her apron. I think Kippy made more than a sandwich, said Muttson. I think he took Goldie for show and tell. How? Furlock asked. He scooped her from the fishbowl with a cup, said Muttson. Then he poured her in a plastic bag. That must be it, said Mrs. Bumblebear. She went to call the school. I hope I'm right, said Muttson. It would be better than Goldie being flushed. You mean you hope we are right, said Furlock. Mrs. Bumblebear came running back. You were right, she said. Kippy took Goldie to school for show and tell. Thank you so much. We are happy to help, said Furlock. Would you like some breakfast? Asked Mrs. Bumblebear. That sounds lovely, said Furlock. Can you make tuna fish pancakes? Yuck, cried Muttson. Furlock, we need to go back to the office. We have another case. Have the bag of honey cookies, said Mrs. Bumblebear. Thank you very much, said Furlock. She popped a cookie in her mouth. Mutton antho tho nath kaseth. I'm right behind you, said Muttson. They jumped into the Furlock mobile and sped away. And the case of the missing goldfish is solved. Thank you so much for joining me for another story time with GamGam. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you're enjoying these videos with stories, please like and subscribe the video. Thank you, and you have a great day.